Hey guys, Chapter 21, Section 4, here we go. When we have our solid waste, what do? We burn it or we bury it. That's what all it comes down to. Now our technologies for doing both of these are very well developed. Once again, especially in the more developed countries. Of course, there are issues, and that's what we're going to focus on in this section. Now, burning waste, we take it, we burn it so it gets a smaller amount. Well, it has a tendency to contribute to air pollution, obviously. We're burning it up in the air, and what comes up must come down, so water pollution, and this leads to greenhouse gases, typically in the form of carbon dioxide and methane. If we bury it, well, burying it tends to contribute to water pollution. And it eventually, all landfills kind of break down and this stuff leaks out into the water. So a couple of different things that we do and just taking a look at what they are. So let's talk about burning solid waste. Now we're going to talk about less developed countries right at the end, but when we talk about burning and burying waste, we're going to start off with kind of how we do it here in the United States or most of the developed world. So burning solid waste. Now the heat released from burning solid waste can be used to heat water, right? We heat water, we get steam. From steam we get electricity. We can spin that turbine. And a lot of our modern day incinerators do just this. We're taking the trash, we burn it, so we're trying to reduce the size. If you burn it, you get a lot less that you have to then store or deal with. And this is kind of the goal. So we get a little bit of both. This waste to energy incinerators produce electricity, so we're getting some benefit out of our trash, kind of like biomass, right? That's in a sense what it is, biological matter, and we're burning it, consuming it. And it's not always biological, but we get the idea. Now, landfills actually emit more pollutants than modern day waste to energy incinerators. Now, people still say, oh, we don't want to burn it. They had a bad rap because it really wasn't that long ago, 20, 30 years ago, when we were burning, we didn't have all the technology that we have now to pull the pollutants out of the air. So if we were just burning trash and the smoke was going right up into the air, it was bad. The technology has improved dramatically now, and the incinerators, once again, actually produce less pollutants than just the landfill when we put it in and nothing's going on. It's just in a dump, if you will. But incinerator ash contains toxic chemicals that have to be disposed of or stored. And stored for how long? We're getting to this near indefinitely. So we do get it down to a much, much smaller size, but then this ash has to be put in some sort of container and sealed off and stored because it has hazardous waste. When we burn it, we are concentrating the hazardous waste really small. Take a look at the picture back here. This is just a simple diagram, but what a modern incinerator looks like. The trucks come in and they just dump it in a pit, but then we have a crane that can pull the trash out of the pit, goes down, burns, heats to our boiler. Now, some of the ash right there is just getting dropped off, and that's making its way down to the dump truck eventually, right? And we're boiling the water. As that water is boiling as well, from here we're getting some waste of that as well. So we go into our wet scrubbers. Remember, the scrubbers take out the poisons of the atmosphere, things we best say like carbon monoxide or other poisons. And then that also goes through where we have an electrostatic precipitator. Electrostatic precipitator is trying to pull out much of the particulate matter, so it clings onto the side of the walls, and then that eventually drops down just by gravity, and all this is going out to the waste bin. And then we have our smokestack, these very fine particles that really are just not pulled out by our scrubbers, electrostatic precipitators. But this is the process. It's a fairly complicated operation. And once again, it's fairly simple in just what we do. But in pulling all of this off, there's a lot of steps to it. But these modern day incinerators are really very good at reducing the overall amount of solid waste down into a small amount of ash. Downside, we got to store it. And that's just what the next section really is. The trade-offs is what we have. We're reducing the volume, we're producing energy, we are concentrating the hazardous waste into a small bit. That's kind of good. Instead of it just being out there all over, we know it's right here. And then the sale of the electricity energy helps to reduce cost of, the trash. Disadvantages. Well, these things are expensive to build. It's not simple. It's got all of these steps, everything in it. It does produce a hazardous waste, which we have to store and do something. It is emitting some CO2. We're burning, right? If we burn something, we're releasing carbon dioxide and some other air pollutants. Once again, the scrubbers and the electrostatic precipitators are pulling a lot out, but they don't catch everything. And also a lot of people think that this actually just encourages waste production, because the companies doing this need a pretty good bit of trash in order to burn to generate the electricity. And if they're kind of selling the electricity, they need the trash. So there's a downside that we think this is encouraging waste, not really trying to minimize it. And from an environmental standpoint, we're all about minimizing, preventing the waste. We're more of the idea of the cradle to cradle, right, instead of cradle to grave. So downside of it. If we're not burning it, we're burying it. We looked at the numbers, in the United States, we're burying about 53%, as opposed to like 80% in Canada, as opposed to like 4% in Denmark. Countries are all over the place on burning versus burying. We bury, more of our trash, the majority of it, at least 53%. Now, landfills. The sanitary landfills. There are different types of landfills out there, and different states have more land and go about it in different ways. But the sanitary ones, these are compacted layers of waste. What we do is we line the bottom, and then a layer of waste gets put down. And then ideally you put some sort of foam or clay over the top of that. Then the next layer of waste goes down and it gets layered again. The layers help keep it separated and help keep the water from filtering down and through and into everything. So making these layers, so we have the bottom is lined, trash layer, trash layer, trash layer. Others will then have pipes down there to collect methane, because as this stuff rots, especially agricultural waste, yard waste, and food, which is just part of our trash in these landfills, as these things rot, they give off methane. Give off carbon dioxide and methane. The methane, however, can be caught, trapped, and stored, and this can be used for electricity and energy again, or being piped off. Methane is natural gas. Now, so what are the types of waste that actually go to our landfill? You and I, we throw it in the bin, right? We carry the bin out to the street and, it's gone. So what do? By and large, this is paper, yard waste. Once again, yard waste, a lot of it is still just going to the landfill. Waste management comes by and picks it up. Depending on where you live and what's going on, some of that might go to a biomass plant to turn it into electricity. Some of it might get mulched or chipped so that we could use it, as ground cover. And others of it just go straight to the landfill. It sort of depends on what it is. Like my bag of leaves out there, that's just going to a landfill. Not much they can do with it. Wood might get chipped or go to a biomass. Once again, paper, yard waste, plastics, metals, wood, glass, and food waste. Guys, basically, if you're throwing it in your plastic bag, it's winding up at the landfill. And depending on where you live, it might be being burned, it might be being buried. So that's just what's out there. So this is what a solid waste site looks like. So we take down at the bottom layer, it's lined. We have some kind of layer and we'll try and put some soil, etc. Now notice you have some pipes down up under that to be able to bleed out water as it does leak through. And this does eventually make it into water supplies. No matter how well these things are designed, eventually they break down. They might last for 50 years, might last 100 years, maybe 150, but they do eventually break down and the stuff can leak out. But this is what we do. It's layered in, and then up at the top we put a nice layer of clay. Clay is is non-porous, right? Very, very teeny tiny particles and the water can't get through, so it tends to run off. We're trying to keep as much water from seeping into the landfill as possible. Then we have just soil over the top of that, topsoil, and we can start growing grass, have a field, park, something else where the landfill used to be. But once again, we fill them up for a matter of years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, and then this one's full and we have to go to another one. And then facilities are there as well. We have the pipe up, pulling off methane, taking care of all the other various things with it. This is a modern sanitary landfill where we bury waste. Advantages. Overall, it's low cost, especially if you have the land area. Not all states are equal in this. Not all countries are equal in how much land they have, but there you go. They can handle large amounts of waste. And then the filled in land can be used for some other purposes. Once again, we can turn it into a park. It could become soccer fields, football fields, baseball fields. We could plant trees back over it, put it back into a forest. Lots of things can be done with the land once it's done. So for 10, 15 years, it's a landfill, but then it's all finished off, covered up, and it's a pretty decent area. There's no shortage of landfill space in a lot of areas. Once again, just as a pro, an advantage. The disadvantages. Well, there's a lot of noise, traffic, and dust around it. If you happen to live near a landfill, the trucks are coming in all the time, dropping it off, while it's a landfill, there's nothing really good about it. There's no advantage to that. They're also releasing greenhouse gases. In the incinerator, we're burning it, we're trying to capture a lot that we can. Here, everything's left to rot and it goes off, unless they're caught. Some of them have things in to trap the methane, others don't, so it depends on the setup. It's an output approach and it encourages waste. We have plenty of space, just throw, waste management gets their money from, we pay them to take care of our trash. It's one of these that encourages the output, where most environmental scientists are more in favor of cradle to cradle. Let's recycle, let's reuse, and not create as much waste. And eventually leaks are going to happen and the groundwater is going to get contaminated. All we can really do is buy time, if you will, with these. And this takes us to open dumps. Now, you have very few true open dumps in the developed world. By and large, North America, Europe, and you have very few of these, but throughout South America, Africa, and Asia, these are often quite common. It's just an open dump. You just have the area, but instead of digging it out and having something that we know once it gets up, we're gonna level it off and recover it, they just have an area of land and they just openly dump the trash. Trucks come, dump it, trucks take off. Just in an open field, might be a natural pit that just happens to be somewhere that they're filling it in. From time to time, they might burn it. They may just set it on fire, but then it can burn for days or even weeks because it's just this kind of slow burn to try and minimize it down. Now, nothing's catching this. This is an open dump and you burn it, the smoke's just going straight up. This is what we complained about 30, 50 years ago by incinerating trash, even in America. But in an open dump, they may start it on fire, but it's just a very slow burn and there's nothing taking any of the pollutants out. These pose safety and health threats for the people that live nearby, and there are plenty of people that just go walk and pick things out through the dump, like the picture we have back here. There are entire families that go to the dumps to pull out anything they can use and anything they can possibly recycle. This is not sanitary, it's not healthy. They're risking their lives by doing it, getting sick, etc. And of course, it's just open to the rain. There's no layers. We're not putting anything over it. Less developed country, they don't have the financial resources because people aren't paying to have their trash taken away, or they're not paying much, very, very small fees. So these leachates, right, as the rain falls and it leaches through all this, these leachates just make it out into the soil and out into the groundwater, really causing big issues. The last picture back here is, one of these open landfills where we're just burning it off. From time to time, they'll come out, with a blowtorch and kind of get it going. But this will go on for weeks at a time, or part of it will be burning. People will still be sifting through the trash over here while they're getting the smoke. And a lot of times the smoke is going to have toxic chemicals in it, whether it's mercuries, leads, carbon monoxide from an impure burn. The list goes on and on. Because we're burning plastics, metals, electronics, whatever happens to be in there. And there's a lot of hazardous materials and metals in a lot of this. So open dumps are really bad, but it's still very common in a lot of less developed countries. But guys, that is pretty much it for burning or burying our trash, what we do. Come back next time and we'll talk specifically about hazardous waste.